A warm welcome to everyone joining us from across the world. I'm Dipty Desai, board member of IIT Bay Area Alumni Association, and I'm looking forward to moderating an exciting conversation on health data and the rush to collect, collate, and analyze it. But before we dig into that, I hope you have enjoyed the conference so far and have learned something new, met some new people, made some new connections in our networking lounge, and we look forward to having you join us for this session today. So this is the first of the parallel panel sessions that we have planned for you. In this hall, we will be talking about health data Goldrush. If you are here to hear about security, you will hear that too, as security is a huge problem in healthcare. But there is another session happening in security in parallel in auditorium A2. If you have been following healthcare, you will notice that the pandemic has really brought home to us that our healthcare system is broken. Data is in silos, technology is needed to unlock, and the treasure trove that we have in healthcare data. And legacy players and new entrants are quickly diving into this health data and are facilitating conversations between data from disparate sources, thereby bringing deeper insights into that data. Many are looking to strike gold and discover new ways to improve care and also reduce costs. So today you will have the opportunity to talk to 3 IIT alums that have embarked on this journey. They were working to solve these problems of tomorrow. And we will talk about the impact that they're making in this exciting field of health and what you need to do if you wish to do the same. So don't be shy, post your questions in the chat window that you have, the Q&A window, and we will try to get to these experts to give you their thoughts and opinions on the questions you have. So like I mentioned, we have executives from 3 healthcare companies, Palani Kumarasan, who heads global R&D for large enterprises like Roche, Piyush Rai, the CTO of Citizen that was recently acquired by Invite, and Raj Singh, Chief Product Officer of Innovator, a startup that was also founded by IIT alumni and that is now a unicorn. So Palani and Piyush and Raj, please introduce yourselves and can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Absolutely. Thanks, Dipty. I'm super happy to be here. And by way of quick introduction, as Dipty mentioned, I head the research and development organization for Roche Diagnostics. I've been in Roche for a little over 11 years across the entire value chain, working in business development, strategy, sales, marketing, product lifecycle management, and now heading R&D. I've also worked across multiple geographies, not only in the US, but also in Europe, in Germany, Sweden, Switzerland, and also Latin America. And the past year and a half, I've had a tremendous privilege to be deeply involved in developing many of the tests and solutions for the pandemic, for COVID, and really proud that the tests have now touched over 660 million individuals around the world to date. By training, I have a PhD in applied biochemistry, a master's in engineering, both from University of California, Berkeley. I did my undergraduate from IIT Madras, the graduating class of 2001. And I grew up in a small town in India, Ranchi, which maybe some of you are aware of. So really happy to be here again, and I will pass on to Piyush.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Dipty. Privileged to be here. I have been a software professional for many, many years now. I graduated from IIT Bombay back in '93, so it's a while back. So my journey has primarily been pure play software, but the most recent company where I work at, Citizen, is a healthcare data company. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about in general is data, and the last few years, specifically around healthcare data. As everyone knows, right, data can actually lead to solutions and insights that can really help large problems that are currently being faced by many individuals and providers in the world. And so, we are trying to play our part by being one of the solution providers using, good technology in this area. So, that's sort of my background. And, prior to Citizen, I have worked at various startups in the Valley, in the Bay Area. And also in between, I actually, went back to India for a few years, started a company there as well, which was in consumer photography space. But yeah, have had a, series of varied experiences, which has hopefully enriched my own, insights today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Piyush. Thanks, Palani. So I'm Raj Singh, as Dipty was talking about. I'm the head of products at Innovacer, and I've been there for last 5 years. So I joined pretty early, just a little bit after Series A, been part of the executive leadership team, initially led the customer success and delivery team for first couple of years and have been leading the product team for last 3 years. I'm pretty sure we'll talk a little bit. I'll talk about what we do and healthcare data and platform work that Innovacer does over the course of this conversation. My background is, so I have a PhD from Berkeley too, but very different, climate modeling. That's what I did. And before that, I graduated from IIT Kharagpur in 2009 in biotechnology. So if anybody wants to talk about how these things change, happy to discuss that offline. Before Innovacer, I was at McKinsey as a management consultant for a few years.
Great, varied backgrounds, but all now going towards the same direction. So just to introduce myself, I'm Dipty Desai, and like many of you, I came to the US to do my PhD at UCSF in San Francisco, and then a postdoc at Stanford University. And I worked mostly in genomics and cancer research there. But since then, I went into the healthcare diagnostics industry to see how these markers could be used over there. So Roche and Hux, and yes, even NASA, technology that we developed at Stanford was going to be used by NASA to look at how differential regulation happens on space versus Earth. So really cool, and find disease markers, upregulation, etc. At some point, I got involved with TIE and IIT because I really felt that healthcare needed this massive infusion of technology. And what better place to find people in technology than, I would say, IIT, right? And so realized that there was a lot that needed to be done at the intersection of health and technology. So today I'm on the board of TIE Silicon Valley and on the board of IIT Bay Area. I'm also a venture partner for Elevate VC and Accelerate It, and I lead CARE is one initiative, with the idea that we want to bring together all of care. You will hear through the course of this talk how care and healthcare is really fragmented, and you really need to be more collaborative, need to work together, because allows you to put all the data together and glean deeper insights as opposed to the siloed approach that we have so far. So that's enough about me, but I'm really excited that we have these IIT graduates over here. They were not in medical school. IIT is a prestigious engineering school, one of the best in the world, and they've all migrated to healthcare, right? And they did have some background like biotech, and I heard over here, and now they're working in healthcare diagnostics, in pharma, cancer research, digital health. So it's kind of like a little bit of pivot. And out there are people who are graduating from IIT that are working in tech companies, and they're thinking, wow, healthcare is really an important thing. If I really want to make an impact, that's the area I should be. I should be working in tech and healthcare. And what kind of advice do you have for them? Like, what can you tell them? Tell them a little bit about what drove you to this change. What inspired you to make this? What made it possible that this is your life's mission, right? And was this difficult? Like, what would be the process if somebody wanted to embark on this journey? What would they need to do? What should they be paying attention to? Can you talk a little bit about it, Palani?
Sure. I mean, it's a great question, Dipty. I'll give it a crack. I mean, there are different paths to Rome, as they say. So there is no one way to be contributing in this space. For me personally, it really started at Berkeley in my grad school. I mean, it's one of those things about these universities. It's really a confluence of disciplines. So I found myself at the intersection of microfabrication, microfluidics, and applied biochemistry. And the more I learned about molecular biology, the more fascinating I found it. I actually, at the more fundamental level, I realized it's perhaps the most sophisticated engineering by Mother Nature over millions and millions of years. And now, over the years, I firmly believe human health and health of our planet are amongst the biggest and toughest problems facing us, as you also alluded to. In terms of whether the change was difficult, I would say not easy. But again, I always have believed if something is not challenging enough, then perhaps it's not worth pursuing. Now, I would say, yeah, taking molecular and cellular biology in my grad school after not having done that for many years in engineering, of course, was not easy, but actually was fun too, because there was lots and lots to learn. And we still are learning as we think about just human biology and diseases. So I would say there's never a wrong time to start. It just depends where your interests are.
Thanks. So true. So true. Piyush, you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think these days, engineering and tech is a tool that can be applied to any domain, right? We have seen that being applied to financial domains or automotive. I mean, you have it, right? I mean, today there's really there are very few things that you can do without tech and engineering. And so healthcare being such a, I would say, data intensive field where data can play a huge role, is really can be significantly influenced by tech. And I think that's why some of us are here. We have built tech enabled solutions for other industries. And in my case, I've looked at data for various industries. And when I got an opportunity to work at a company like Citizen, where we are really trying to address the needs of patients who are in their last stages of life and are undergoing treatment, the role data and tech can play in that situation is huge. And so for me, it was a no-brainer. It was data, which is something I love from a professional and intellectual standpoint, but it also has a higher level sort of motivation for me to help people who can benefit from that tech-enabled approach to solving this problem. So I think if you look at it's more of a transitional thing. Of course, healthcare is very, very different and difficult than some of the other domains, and they have their own challenges. But I think the role that tech and data can play today should encourage all of us technologists to actually play some role in that domain, right? So that's sort of my motivation to be there.
That's true. The impact is so important. Yeah. And Raj, you want to?
Yeah, great. Yeah, of course, great answers by Palani and Piyush. And same sentiments as Piyush was talking about. Technology is a tool that can be used in pretty much any industry. Now, when you think about it, healthcare is the biggest industry that's out there. In US, it's close to $4 trillion. And I think a lot of people, especially in technology that I talk to, most of my friends are in tech, they kind of like ignore that fact. And I talk about all these companies which are in healthcare doing 200 billion in revenue, and people don't know about them. Hey, have you heard about Optum? Have you heard about McKesson? And they're like, no. They're like, these are giant companies, right? I mean, top 10 companies, top 15 companies in the world. So, and healthcare is a highly technically advanced field. But the technology there till now, a lot of focus has been around diagnosis, surgery, and all that kind of stuff. But data is absolutely critical. And I think what has changed over the last few years, not just in US, across the world, but especially in the US in the last 10 years, is that digitization of healthcare data has gained massive momentum. And now when you have all this data which is digitized, the healthcare industry is talking about, hey, when I go to Amazon, it knows exactly what I want to buy. When the patient comes to the doctor has no idea where this patient was a couple of months ago. So there is definitely something broken, and now the data is digitized. So massive opportunity. And for me, it was not a planned entry per se within healthcare, right? Means while I did my undergrad in biotech, my PhD was completely different in climate modeling. McKinsey was all tech, traditional technology industries. It just came around my discussions with Abhinav, who is the CEO of Innovacer. He used to stay at my home when he would come, and we were talking about it, and it just fascinated me. Innovacer had just got into healthcare, right? It became a healthcare company in 2016, and what fascinated was application of this technology within healthcare and how much potential it had, and that's the reason I jumped over. But if anybody is thinking about technology, thinking about healthcare, there is no better time to put them together at this time.
Yeah. No, that's so true. In fact, earlier today, I don't know if some of the attendees may have attended Raj Pandey's talk. His talk is all about, motivation and what, what do you want to do in life and how do you make it happen, right? And he brought in technology, biotech and CRISPR as like some of the awesome tools out there. And there's so much data in healthcare. There's so much out there that we're still at the tip of the iceberg. We still have a lot more to do, and really looking forward to all of that unraveling in the next decade or so, right? So exciting. So I know that we would love to have questions from our audience, and let me take a look if has anybody posted anything. But there is a request from the audience. One of the attendees is asking that I would like to ask the panelists to discuss about innovation in the clinical trial design and reducing the population size for clinical trials. Does anybody want to take this on?
Sure. No, certainly. I mean, this is obviously within Roche, both on the pharma side and the diagnostic side. We certainly think about this. I mean, there are a couple of things that we have already been seeing and also even bringing into clinical trials. I mean, in clinical trials, as most of you know, there is always a trial arm and there is a control arm. And what we have already seen even before the pandemic, the past few years, for the control arm, you can really go to real world data, at least on the control arm side. So you don't necessarily have to have these two parallel arms together. You could kind of go faster to market if you're really focusing on the control arm and use real world evidence more. Faster to market if you're focusing on the trial arm and using the real world evidence for the control arm of the trial. So that's one thing that we have also used in different both drug and diagnostic trials. The other thing that I would say through the pandemic, we have seen the shift from centralized trials, which are run through CROs, contract research organizations across different hospitals, to decentralized trials, where you actually are taking the trial to the patient and you're taking it closer to where, to their homes, essentially. And through technology, you are able to really still control the trial in a very good way, extract information. So that's another important change we are seeing. The third one I'll just mention, and then I'll pass it on to Raj and Piyush to comment, is also discussions with the FDA, at least in the US, with the different regulatory bodies. I mean, by nature, they have to be conservative, but there is openness to also use more and more real world evidence for approvals. So for example, for the COVID test, we are right now there was emergency use authorization, EUAs, at the beginning of the pandemic. But of course, those are not full authorizations. So as we go through now a full authorization with the FDA, we have been really tapping into the real world evidence to then bring it into the approval process. So there is a lot of movement in this space, and I think it's for the better. But please, Raj, Piyush, please add comment.
Absolutely. It means this is just one of the areas, interestingly, that I myself and Innovacer has been very interested over the last few months. And the point here is that clinical trials are going through massive change, as Palani is talking about, right? And when you think of something like a distributed clinical trials, it would not have existed if there was not a need and a push from it because of COVID. And this is just an example of where what COVID has shown is that you don't need to have all these in-person clinical trials. You can run them very effectively in a distributed manner, efficiently, and you can run a lot more, right? So, but it's a highly technology-intensive process, right? Till now, if you went to a typical CRO, their whole model is around services. Hey, we'll put this many people, we'll enroll this many people, and that's why you charge us, right? But because there is such a shift and acceptance of technology, distributed clinical trials is one big change that is happening. Of course, real world evidence is massive because of all this healthcare data that has started to become available. But yeah, definitely one of the big areas where a lot of change is happening. And it's reflected if you guys are seeing with companies like Medable. Actually, one of our IIT, Pan-IIT president, ex-Pan-IIT president, Avik Pal, he is CEO and founder of a company called Clinios. So I was talking to him just 2 days back about it. So there's a lot of stuff happening in that, and technology is a big enabler there at this point.
Yeah, it is actually the clinical trial has been a pretty critical part of our solution platform, even at Citizen. Palani talked about the real world data, right? That's so essentially when a clinical trial program is launched, you need to recruit patients who match the trial. So as you guys know, in the past, the companies have been trying to recruit patients. It's an expensive process, can take months and months. We have tried to flip it around because we have the patient and the data. We have actually built a clinical trial matching capability on our platform. So it's almost reversing the problem where we can actually match the patient based on their health profiles and their geography, like you said, right? Closer to their homes and using the various criteria that the clinical trial matching needs. And that's very complex. It's extremely complex. It's not just based on one or two attributes. It's based on multiple, your stage and the arm of the trial. I mean, there are so many factors there. I'm sure, Palani is very, very familiar with it. So we have flipped it around, and the contribution we are trying to make is once we have a patient, many patients don't even know what to do if they want to get enrolled in the trial. So we are sort of creating that, so to speak, push towards finding the right trial and then matching the two. So it's almost like a matching between the people who are looking for it, and all that comes with the real world evidence data for that patient. So I think that's the way we are trying to contribute to it, and obviously that our whole platform is sort of based on that type of philosophy. So yeah, 100%. I think this is going in the right direction.
Yeah, and so true. I think for those of you who don't know much about clinical trials out in the Bay, the way we used to do clinical trials is it would be like a researcher would have an opportunity for people to enroll in that, and they would put out a little note out there in the bulletin board saying, looking for patients, and then poor grad students would enroll into these things and all that. And it has now technologically enabled, like Piyush was saying, that you're now creating this marketplace where you're bringing the trial participants and the people who are conducting the trial together and matchmaking them so that you have better outcomes, you have better matches between the patients that you're really looking for, as opposed to randomly finding them right through bulletin boards. So it's really good to see that. I know that there's many questions coming, but before I go on to another question, I really wanted to deep dive into what each one of you is doing at your respective company. Maybe it might be good for you to talk about what exactly do you do on a day-to-day basis, and how is that impacting the world? How is that impacting, and what are the challenges that you see in there? So if you want to go, Raj, do you want to go first on this?
Absolutely, right. I can do that. So at the highest level, Innovacer is a healthcare data platform company focused on creating this horizontal platform on top of which we have a few solutions, right? Population health management, patient relationship management, risk adjustment, quality management solutions. And we started with provider side and have gone into a little bit into payer and life sciences. I think that's where we differentiate from most healthcare technology companies, that our primary focus is providers. And I saw a couple of questions coming around, how do you make providers adopt to technology? And I would love to answer that, because I think there's a lot of misconception on how technology works in healthcare. And I can talk a little bit about it. So yeah, I lead the product team at Innovacer, right? So all of it, right? Platform, application, solutions, design, product management, strategy, all of that within Innovacer. And while we started with a population health management solution, our focus was always on building this horizontal platform and then opening up this ecosystem, this data for everybody to use. So now we have a couple of our own solutions, but we are opening it up, like Roche, and this is the public news, so I can talk about it. Roche is building a whole clinical decision support suite on top of our platform, because our specialty is that we can go into a health system, integrate all of their data, make sure it's high quality, and expose it, right, to our internal developers and external developers. And because we are working directly with providers and health systems, we have access to identifiable and complete data sets across the board, right? So that's the difference, where most of the technology companies get access to de-identified data or grouped in data or something, but we have exact patient level data, because that's how we work. So I think as we are opening this up, we expect a lot more innovation to happen on our platform. And that's kind of like one of my primary goals over the next couple of years, is how can we enable these really smart and innovative companies who have built advanced analytics model, great care plan, or great way to manage diabetes or palliative care, to actually scale and deploy across these large health systems in the US and then in the world. So that's what I do.
Pretty cool. Piyush, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So Citizen is actually a patient-centric data platform. So like Raj said, right, they went provider first. We went patient first, and there's a little bit of history about the company, why we went patient first, and there are motivations to do that. And as we all know firsthand, that patient is the person who's least in the loop in their own health in the US, and I think, even across the world. So I think fundamentally we are trying to solve that problem. We're trying to empower the patient to take control of their health data, and hence the results of their health treatment and so on, right, from their standpoint. So that's been the fundamental driving principle for us. Of course, being patient-centric, comes with its own challenges, that, we don't sign BAs with providers, so we can't go and ask them for data directly. So it has to be patient-routed data. But the advantage there is that for a patient, then we can actually have complete data of their history, right? So it doesn't matter which provider they went to or where they got treated. Once they have that data in their control, then they can consent to share that data with, pharma or clinical trials or many different applications. So that's the platform that Citizen built, which is, very, very patient-centric. And that's why we are also able to sort of do the matching with trials and push them there. The direction in which we are going is sort of very, I would say, quite parallel to what Raj was mentioning, is that once we have the data layer ready, which it is today, we have now our partners and ourselves building applications on top of it that can help, various use cases. So that's the direction we are going with on to now.
Good. Very interesting.
Very interesting. I mean, Raj and Piyush, because I'll come back to it, because it kind of plays very nicely into the kind of things that we are trying to achieve. So just to talk a little bit about Roche, I mean, Roche is it's a little bit unique in terms of a healthcare company, in that it has a really large pharmaceutical and a diagnostic arm. And then there are other key organizations like Foundation Health, and Genentech is, of course, part of the pharmaceutical side, and then also Flatiron Health and a few of these other entities that are coming on the insight side into the Roche group. So I'm part of the Roche Diagnostics organization, which is world's leading in vitro diagnostics company. In terms of what I do, how I think about problems, first of all, we look at, okay, what are the disease areas of highest burden? And this won't come as a surprise. There are probably 3 or 4 disease areas of highest burden. The biggest still is cardiovascular diseases, followed by infectious diseases and oncology. And then neurodegenerative diseases, as we all recognize, is also something that has a huge disease burden, and it's only going to increase in the future. So across these diseases, the way we think about is we will take specific indication. So if you think about cardiovascular disease, we would think an indication like chronic heart failure within that. And there we think about a patient journey. So if it's you or me with chronic heart failure, all the way from prevention, how do you do screening, to say you have to get diagnosed, then going through a treatment, how do you select for treatment? And then post-treatment, how are you monitoring? So we're looking at that whole continuum of care in the patient journey. And we are thinking about, okay, where can we come with different diagnostic solutions in that patient journey that can help improve the standard of care? Now, it can be through specific tests. It can be through a combination of tests. And this is where then data also plays such an important role, because as we aggregate, like the kind of work that Piyush and Raj and their companies are driving, is to really bring rich, individualized, longitudinally characterized data of individuals at scale. So once you have that, that really allows us to see where we can combine data from different modalities, different kinds of tests, to improve the standard of care. So that's really what I think about all the time. And also internally, we have very rich data. I mean, every year, there are over 25 billion tests, Roche tests, that are performed around the world. So we also try to really mine that to also gain better understanding across these different diseases.
It's pretty cool. It's very interesting. 3 companies doing a lot of different things. But the end goal is putting this patient at the center of care, like Piyush was talking about. And then like Raj was talking about, and I think there was a question out there is like, building trust in new technology with care providers is a big challenge. Doctors are very skeptical, right? They've been burnt in the past. How do you address that? And Raj brought up this whole platform approach, right? Where you have a platform, now you can plug in developers and solutions, and you can build a richer platform that now already has gained the trust of the hospital systems, and you can now put your solutions into that pipeline and build alongside with it. So it's pretty cool, and then of course, what Palani said too. So, I was just talking to a CDO of a hospital system, and he always says that everybody's trying to sell me a steering wheel, right? And we can't do that. We can't have multiple steering wheels. But if you have one steering wheel and everybody else can add their apps onto it or the solutions onto it, then makes it much easier life too. I know there's a question on there on regulation and compliance. It's always those 2 words that healthcare has to deal with. So I wanted to ask this question. There's a lot of regulations in healthcare. It always prevents people from venturing into healthcare. So do you find these regulations annoying? Do you find that they're justified? And what kind of changes would you like to see in those in the future?
I can take a shot at it first. So I think per se, regulations and the compliances are not specific to healthcare. They are there in other industries too, right? You have it in financial, legal, I think they're there. And I think they have a place because you need to have the checks and balances. I think what has been in the past severely lacking in the healthcare industry is the use of technology to manage these regulations or comply to them, right? And I think if you take the example of financial industry, they have actually crossed a lot of barriers to now support the regulations and the compliances, but still they are moving much, much faster. Right? 20 years back, that was not the case. So what I have experienced in the past around 4 years is that, healthcare has not really adopted the right technologies and paradigms that can actually help us manage these regulations. Like, for example, it's HIPAA, patients' right of access, consents. These are all technologically solvable problems. And obviously, we are all trying to do that. But I think the barrier is that, and not the fact that those compliances exist. Everything doesn't need an FDA approval, for example, right? Everything that we do in healthcare doesn't need an FDA approval. There are areas which need that, but then there's so much other work that can be done more efficiently. So I think what my experience has been, of course, I'm not a veteran in the healthcare space, but from in the last 4 years, what I've seen is if we can use technology intelligently to enable some of these, manage and enable the compliances and the regulations, then that would take us a long way. I mean, the cycles will reduce significantly. On our platform, for example, we have created a pretty sophisticated consent management system so that we can capture the consent from the patient, and then the path after that becomes very, very easy. So things like that can be used, but I don't think having those regulations and compliances by themselves are a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can build on it. I think, Piyush, you captured it quite wonderfully. I mean, I think I agree with everything you said. I mean, there's always two sides to the coin. Just a couple of things when folks from outside healthcare think about healthcare. It's very important to ask yourself a very simple question. If you or your loved one needs a test or a treatment or a procedure, what would be your wish? I mean, we have to ensure there's a certain standard that is met, that you have a certain level of confidence on what kind of treatment, because this is, at the end of the day, this is the most important. These will be perhaps the most important decisions you will be making for yourself or your loved ones. So I agree with Piyush absolutely that you do need a certain level of regulation. And what makes it even more complicated is we still don't understand many things about human biology and diseases. So that makes it more messy. But to your point, when it comes to data privacy and consent, I agree that there are better ways to manage that, because with the right consent, because the data at the end of the day, a patient data belongs to the patient, but with the right consent and how do you facilitate it, you can gain access to data that can help also science and progress, because at the end of the day, we also want that as a society, that things are progressing. So I actually agree with very much what Piyush said.
Yeah. So I think most of the things have been said. So I'll just add 2 lines. One, I don't think regulations per se are stifling innovation within healthcare. I think data interoperability is a problem on how do you share data and get access to data, but that is less than regulation. It's more about incumbent players and how they're trying to protect. And the same thing happened in finance world. If you go back 15 years ago, banks were not that eager to share data, but eventually they did, right? So I don't think that's an issue. And having seen technology and healthcare and a few other places, I would say that I don't think that healthcare per se has too much of these regulations, right? There are regulations in all industries, right? There's GDPR in Europe, which is not healthcare specific, but there's a lot of things within that, right? So I don't think it's a challenge. Sometimes it can be a obstacle to overcome, but not really a challenge. Dipty, I would like to add a little bit on that question that came around healthcare users, because when I talk to a lot of people, there is this misconception about acceptance of technology within healthcare, right? So I would just say 3 things. First, when you think about healthcare, it's not just doctors. There are a lot of different users. There are care managers, nurses, medical assistants, administrative staff, CFO, operational people, patients, and doctors, right? So, and a lot of time, a lot of the work that happens are done by these people and not by doctors. So don't always think you'll get doctors to do it. Doctors are extremely busy, right? They they don't have time. They're probably the profession I've never seen anybody as busy, right? Even as a management consultant from McKinsey, I can tell you most doctors work more than management consultants. So that's one thing to understand. The second thing is when you think of technology solution within healthcare, think of what Google Maps did with navigation. Google Maps doesn't tell you that, hey, you can take these 15 different paths and all these paths are there. No, it tells you turn right on next after 200 meters, then take a left, right? So it's about how are you using the technology? You have all the data in the background, right? Traffic, paths, and everything. Insights need to be focused. And the third thing when you're thinking about solution in healthcare technology is that there are a lot of workflows that exist. You cannot come and expect that a doctor is going to use a completely separate application because you have the best insight while they are working on their EHR. You have to build within the workflow of what they are already using, right? I think these three things are absolutely critical when you think about adoption within the healthcare space for new technology offerings.
Wow, this is such an exciting panel, and there's so many questions pouring in, and we only have 5 minutes remaining. I don't know where to go now, but I think these are all very fascinating insights. And at the end of the day, the data is like gold for so many people, right? Everybody is trying to, like one of you guys mentioned, is trying to keep that. The incumbents are trying to keep the hold they have on the data. And as we collect more and more data, this data can improve care, reduce costs, can do a lot of good, right? So who should that data belong to? I know it should belong to the patient, and there are this. How do you make it happen? How do you open up this data? What can you share with the company, the doctor, the patient, the insurance companies? What about access, regulation, implementation? Do you guys want to throw something out on that? I'm also looking at some of these questions over here, and discuss a few pressing, hanging problems or issues in healthcare, looking for solutions. And how can entrepreneurs think about impact of healthcare data fragmentation? That's loaded, I know, but feel free to answer whatever you think is most pressing. Yeah.
Maybe I'll just pick one thing, and one of the most pressing topics, and because it goes into one of the questions that has also been asked, I do think we need to think more about prevention and early diagnosis, because the earlier you catch a disease or even before it becomes a disease, you have so many more options for the individuals and patients. And the outcomes we also know are much better across different diseases. An example, like a very kind of pressing thing is around Alzheimer's. For example, it takes multiple years of the disease progression before you actually diagnose it. But if you are able to diagnose definitively years ahead, you will have many different options to at least slow the progression. We still don't have a curative therapy, but you can slow the progression. So I think early diagnosis, early prevention, that's something that's hugely important in oncology, also in other chronic diseases. So that's something I would say is a pretty big problem that we should be thinking about very carefully.
Piyush, Raj, one of you, next, some words.
I can take the ownership thing that has come up. So healthcare data by definition is owned by the patient, but there are rules around continuity of care where the patient gives rights to the physician and by extension hospital systems where they are treating. So they can share patient data. The only thing to be very careful is what do you do with that data, right? And there are a lot of examples to be careful about. While for if there's the e-commerce data and web activity data and you used it for some other purposes, I think the consequences are not that extreme as if you misused healthcare data. So that's the only place I would be careful. But eventually, it's owned by the patient. If patient said yes, you're golden. But the same thing can be done by the physician and the hospital system also.
I'll just add here the practical reality today. So yeah, the patient owns the data, but if you think about the systems that currently are implemented in hospitals, they're all closed systems, right?
Yeah.
And there's no way for me to go and say, okay, I need all my health data, and there's no way to go until, of course, we are trying to do that with Citizen, but but it's a hard problem today, and not because of technology, not because of technological reasons. It's just that these systems are closed, right? So there's a new regulation that has been approved, I think passed in April this year, which mandates all providers to make the data accessible to the patients. But as we know, the practical implementation of this will take years, and interpretation and all those things. So I think in the near future, hopefully, we will be able to build a system where the data can be actually virtually sort of integrated for a patient and give them full controls. There are various technical ways of implementing it. Blockchain is one of them. But these are all things that will probably happen in the next few years, where even though the data is distributed, it can be virtually controlled centrally by the patient. So that's what I'm excited about. Hopefully in the next few years, these kind of technological tools can be used to speed up some of this process.
So as you can see, we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. And these experts here are the ones working on it and making it all happen. Before we go, I know we are down to the last minute. I just wanted to say, since they're all IIT graduates, I wanted to give them one piece of advice, one word maybe of advice, caution, or encouragement to people who are looking at healthcare. And so maybe just rapid fire, if you guys can just say, what would you, if you had to tell your fellow IITians one word of advice, caution, or encouragement, what would it be? First,
yeah, I would encourage. It's a vast field. There's a lot of innovation to be done. It's intellectually stimulating, and we are solving towards betterment of humans. So 100% encouragement.
Fully endorsed. Next.
I think at the highest level, the need to understand is that adoption of technology in healthcare has been very slow. So if you wanted to see a white space that we all talk about when we are starting something new, this is a massive white space for technology. This was not the case 10 years ago. Like anybody who has been in healthcare technology will tell you that what is happening right now is massive. It's big change. So yes, same as Piyush, it's big opportunity for technology and core technologies. You don't need to know healthcare. What is needed here is good technology, right? Platform, predictive algorithms, right? Good user interface. Think about all the stuff that has already happened in finance or e-commerce and others. They are all going to happen in healthcare at a bigger scale.
I'll keep it really short here because a lot has been said. The only things from a different angle I would say is we have to recognize, again, I was as mentioning before, human biology and diseases inherently are very complex and messy. It's very different from how we may approach technology as engineers, but it's worth the effort because, as Piyush said, it really has an opportunity it gives you an opportunity to make a meaningful difference in this world. So while the problems are extremely challenging, they're absolutely worth going after.
So true. So true. So exciting opportunities, lots of opportunities to make an impact, make a difference. You'll be pushing the boundaries. You'll be going solo, like Raj Pandey was saying. So hope you join us, and we are always available for more questions offline, LinkedIn, connect with the experts here and continue the discussion. Thank you all for joining us, and over to you again.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.